before we get into all of this, I just want to say that I am sure I will get things wrong in this video. I am sure I'll miss things out. I'm sure it won't be particularly articulate since I've not slept, but I really wanted to make a video about this because much as I have wanted to make a wrap-up video or a TBR video, it doesn't feel right to pretend like I'm jolly and like nothing's going on in the world, and I just want to address what's happening and how I feel about it. So it's almost 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks tomorrow since the murder of George Floyd occurred, and it really shouldn't have taken this to make me truly reflect on how I haven't been the best white ally, how I've failed as a white ally, but this is what's happened. And even though there have been countless others, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others, let's say their names, this feels different. And I don't want this to feel performative, but I truly believe the stance that if you aren't angry, you're not paying attention. And I recognise that I am privileged because I am appalled, I'm horrified, I'm angry, I'm upset over what's happening, over the systemic racism that people suffer, not just in America, in the UK, and in the world. But I also know that I can turn social media off when it all gets too much, because I don't have to live with that reality of being in fear for my life, or of living with microaggressions of racism. I don't have to think about that. And I think it's important for me to acknowledge that I was scared about even posting this video because of getting things wrong, because of that fear. Not out of fear of losing subscribers, because to be honest, if you don't believe the Black Lives Matter, then please unsubscribe. I don't want you to follow me. I want you to go and educate yourself and understand where you're wrong, because they do. And one wonderful thing about being a reader and being part of BookTube is that I really feel like this community is sharing resources in books that they can read, because I think education is actually the best place to start, because it's a way of listening to people who have experiences that, like I said, I will never understand, but I think that listening and reading about them and understanding the history behind systemic racism is one of the best ways to understand, but also the closest we can come to empathising, though, like I say, I fully admit we can never properly do that. I can never do that as a white person. And I've been listening to the Audible series, which is free. You can all just go and listen to it. It doesn't cost anything. It's not like an audiobook, and it's called In Search of Black History, and it was really illuminating. It moved through time. But one of the things that it really highlighted to me is how much during the 18th century, particularly when slavery was so rife, even though of course it's been around for longer than that, how much educated slaves were feared, because that gave them the tools to empower themselves and to gain emancipation. So education has always been a powerful tool, and these are two books that I physically have that have helped me, and I know I've talked about before. I know they're quite obvious choices, but I just want to highlight them to you again. So Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge, who also has a free podcast about race that I intend to listen to. It's on Spotify again, it's free to listen to. And this is wonderful because it was very diverse in the topics that it covered. Of course, it's a history, but also I think for me the most helpful chapter was about feminism and how we need to be more intersectional with feminism, how people of colour, women of colour particularly, need a safe space where they can share their problems because they're not being heard. And also British on Race, Identity and Belonging by Afua Hirsch. This is really interesting because it's a very different perspective, because she came from a privileged background, she's been to Oxford, she's biracial as well, and like Natives by Carl, which I also recommend but I don't have physically, it looks at the idea of being biracial in Britain but being seen as black, and how you're perceived, and even when you come from a successful background or have made your own success, you are still put in a box and targeted by racism. And I will leave much better and more extensive reading lists below, because there's many of them, and that's a wonderful thing that I'm seeing being shared. Because for me, I remember when I was 12 and I learnt about slavery, and all we really talked about was America. It was very pinned on America. We did not talk about how Britain was instrumental in creating the slave trade, how our economy was propped up by it for centuries. How, actually, I read in this book, I remember it vividly, about how even though we love to brag that we abolished slavery way before America, we made the slaves that were supposedly free work for 4 years for free to pay part of the debt that their masters, I suppose, were owed, because they were losing their property. And then they just used loopholes and bought slaves in other countries where it was still legal and sent them to the plantations, so people became even richer after slavery was abolished through slaves. So I remember reading that and just being horrified of sitting there and welling up with my mouth open, horrified that I had been so ignorant of this for so long, and thinking how everyone is the same, how the only thing we learn about in terms of Black history is traumatic, and we don't talk about the victories, we don't talk about the empires they had, the warrior woman queens that I learnt about in this In Search of Black History series on Audible. And it made me so upset that I had never really questioned this, and that this is the normality, and all you can do is go and not ask Black people, where do I find these things, what do I read, what do I look at, but just look at these lists, because it's exhausting for them to have us that like need to be educated. I'm not being very articulate. I just thought about how in the publishing industry it's so undiverse, but that also isn't an excuse for me to say, oh, that's why I haven't read many non-white books, because my library, I've got hundreds of books and probably only about 15%, I would say, maximum 20%, probably not that much, are by BAME authors, and that is pathetic. And this is something I've known about for a while, and I want to do a book course soon because I bought some books for my birthday, but you will notice they are all by white women. And it doesn't mean that I can't enjoy those books, but that's so disappointing that the default story that even I am still seeking out is white, that I am privileged because I am represented, I am overrepresented, because apparently I need to identify more because my story is more important to be told. But the thing is, I don't want to seek out books and read books so I can feel good about myself, or out of some kind of obligation. I don't want this to become a box I can tick that this month I read my book by a Black author so that I feel like I'm making progress. I don't want that to be a box, because these people, their stories are not boxes, that they have a rich culture and history and creativity that I think is so underappreciated. And I was thinking about the book Girl by Edna O'Brien, which was longlisted for Women's Prize, and it's come up in other shortlists for book prizes, which is about what's the name? I always forget the name. The Boko Haram kidnapping of girls in Nigeria, and it was, albeit well researched, but it made me think about how on the long list there was a real absence of African authors, and it's troubling to me when a white Irish author gets more acclaim and praise for writing about something that isn't necessarily her story to tell. And I know that writers should be able to write what they want. I remember in my second year of university I did a playwriting course, and my teacher was of Indian descent, and she said you can write whatever you want, and the play that we studied that she'd written was called Sugar Mummies, and it was really wonderful. It was about the sex industry in Jamaica, where white women will go to Jamaica and have sex with young gigolos. And she went to Jamaica and she did the research, and she's obviously not from a Caribbean background, but she's still able to write that play. But that is very different to me in the sense that she is a writer who told me always gets some kind of curry joke in her reviews, who herself is put in a box. And I think I wouldn't be so bothered by this, because yes, it's wonderful to highlight this and to bring this plight and this awful story to the forefront of people's minds, but at the same time, why is it that she gets more acclaim than African authors? Why does she get more attention? Because she undoubtedly, unquestionably has with this book, and it just speaks of the wider problem in the British book industry, that it's not diverse enough. I mean, really, apart from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, I can't really name any current Nigerian authors. I can talk about Chinua Achebe, but I haven't read him yet, and he's dead. So it's not good enough, and what I can do is try and support black writers and creatives. I've donated to 3 different charities, one of which is about supporting black writers in the industry, and I think that's so important. I know money is difficult right now, but if you do have financial means, I really recommend, or would urge you to even subscribe, especially if you can make it a regular payment. I just think this is what we need to be focusing on now. I know there's been so much push for different charities and that kind of thing at this time, even before all of this happened with COVID, but I really want to support people in an active way, and that's one way that we can do it and make a noticeable difference. And I read poems every night on my Instagram stories, and I want to make sure that I always read at least one poem out of the 3 that's by an author of colour, because again, I'm just reading a lot of old white dudes, and they're great, like Thomas Hardy's great and all that, and I love old poetry, but the canon is so white. And again, there's just this rich, undiscovered world, and it's sad that I have to really seek it. That apart from ones like Maya Angelou, there's just not many prominent poets who aren't white, and this has to change, and I need to change that and my awareness. So I really want to step out. I really want to be more anti-racist. There have definitely been times where I've not called things out. I remember at work when someone made a joke about Harry and Meghan that was racist, and everyone else laughed at me, and I felt deeply uncomfortable about the joke, but I didn't call it out because I didn't want to be a killjoy, and I was afraid that everyone would not like me because they'd found it funny. And I'm so disappointed in myself now, and I never want to have a regret like that ever again. And I want to follow more black creators. I have followed more black creators, especially on Instagram, just to celebrate them, their bodies, their art, their music, their words, their activism, to disrupt my feed that was just so white, and it's refreshing, honestly. And I need to just keep on with this journey. This has been, I feel like this, I almost don't want to post. I feel like this has not been helpful, but I just want to hold myself accountable. I really do, and I want you to hold me accountable. If I keep reading books by white authors, if I keep buying books by white authors, tell me, recommend me books by BAME authors, like, please, because I'm so happy, even though I can't afford to keep buying books, like even just like get them out from the library, to get them on audio, but whatever it is, I really want to make an active change, and I don't want to look back and think, oh, I recognised that I wasn't reading many books that weren't by white authors, but I just carried on reading books by mainly white authors. I will be so disappointed with myself. We still got half of the year to go. I can still change my reading, and I'm sure I'll enjoy it. And like I said, not out of a sense of obligation, but out of a sense of just wanting to find new experiences and emotions and characters and stories and narratives that will bless me and touch me and break me, and all these wonderful things that stories can do. I think it's such a human thing to be creative and to know that we have this shared experience, and reading does that. It's it's so powerful, whether it's non-fiction or fiction or poetry or whatever it is. I just want to do better, and I know that this is not much. I know that donating a few pounds and trying to read more books and following some people is the bare minimum we should be doing. But it's a start, and I have to start somewhere, and I hope you will too. So I will link charities down below, I will link podcast suggestions down below, all these things, reading list down below, and I would love to know what you're doing in your lives to try and be a better ally. And like I said, any recommendations for books or anything that I can listen or watch to support Black creatives, like please tell me, and I will see you soon for more Bookish Shenanigans.